along with it. I came across this illustration from Deborah Blue's book, Central Orthodoxy. I've been thinking about maybe someone should start a small guerrilla group of activists whose task it would be to put shocking little figurines of Batman or Barbies in manger scenes. They could work both in private homes and in public spaces. Suburban housewives would be shocked and would shriek to find Batman placed on their little manger scenes. Churches would be horrified to find plastic Barbies and dinosaurs on their altars. But people will pay attention. They'll look twice. They may even have to stop their car and get out if they see a big plastic Homer Simpson or a pink flamingo leaning over baby Jesus. I actually wonder, I'm not the first to come up with this idea. It might have been some guerrilla group that first placed wise men or magi in the manger scene. Following Christmas in the church year comes Epiphany. Usually when someone thinks of the word epiphany, you think it's associated with having that aha moment. The moment of truth is revealed. You realize something, or you get that big idea, something becomes clearer to you. You get insight. It's kind of like you have 20/20 vision. You have perfect vision. Technically, epiphany means appearing or appearance, which is how it's used in the New Testament in terms of Christ's appearing in judgment at the end of history. It was the Apostle Paul's favorite term for what we often call the second coming of Christ. The Savior, who's been invisible since his ascension into heaven, will one day be made manifest once again. In terms of the liturgical year, Epiphany refers to the appearance of the star in the east, leading the Magi to the Christ child. Matthew adds this story to the gospel, and those reading it for the first time may have had an epiphany when they read about the Magi. Those reading Matthew's gospel may have had to stop and reread the passage just to make sure it was really the Magi that Matthew's talking about. Today, when we read this text, we miss the scandal of the Magi because they're so routinely added into the manger scenes as they're dressed like royalty in their fine Persian clothes. For the original readers of this text, this was scandalous. What would Magi be doing in the manger scene? After all, they weren't thought of too highly in terms of the Jewish tradition. One ancient rabbi is even quoted as saying, "He who learns from the Magi is worthy of death." Just like today, in the manger scenes, we'd have to stop and do a double take if we saw Homer Simpson or Britney Spears hanging out with baby Jesus and Mary and Joseph in a manger scene. The Jews were strictly forbidden to have anything to do with Magi. Even God warns about it. In the Old Testament, in Isaiah 47, we read, "All the counsel you have received has only worn you out. Let your astrologers come forward. Those stargazers who make predictions month by month, let them save you from what is coming. Surely they're like stubble. The fire will burn them up, and they can't even save themselves from the power of the flame. There are no coals to warm anyone. There's no fire to sit by. That's all they can do for you. These you have labored with and trafficked with since childhood. Each of them goes on in his error. There's not one that can save you. Magi, or what we would call astrologers today, were to be avoided. Many times throughout the Israelite history, the people would turn away from God and turn to other gods. They'd follow the priests of other religions for help. Many of these would be involved with magic or sorcery or the occult. An original reader of this text might be shocked that Matthew would add them to the story. Why would they be invited to the Messiah's birth? What's so special about them? Tradition tells us that Magi were from the east, probably from Persia. They were stargazers and followed the signs of the stars. We don't know if they were into the dark arts or what their role was. Some say that they wanted to pay tribute to the King of Kings, thus fulfilling Old Testament prophecies that kings would bow down to the Messiah. There's not too much evidence to support this. Author and Pastor Scott Jose writes, first of all, the Magi were almost certainly not royalty. At best, they may have been associated with the royal courts of Persia, though even that much is uncertain. Further, we don't really know how many of them there were. The long tradition of 3 wise men is mostly based on the slender piece of evidence that they gave young Jesus 3 gifts. But when you think about it, that proves virtually nothing. The notion of 3 kings was furthered in the 8th century when St. Bede strangely supplied the names of Melchior, Gaspar, and Balthazar for the Magi. Where he got those names, but is by no means certain. He may have just made them up. Some centuries after that odd new development in Magi lore, the Empress Helena made her own contribution to Magi mythology by claiming to have had a vision that led her to the burial sites of these 3 kings. So she had the remains exhumed, and the skulls of these 3 kings remain on display today in Cologne, Germany. It's all fantasy, of course, on par with Steven Spielberg's fast and loose filming with the legend of the Holy Grail and the Indiana Jones films. The biblical record is the only evidence that we have to go on. Based on the Bible, what can be said with some certainty is that these Magi were the ancient equivalent of magicians, not of the Harry Houdini or David Copperfield type, but more like what we would call astrologers and stargazers. People who tried to get the hang of the present and future events by reading what was in the stars. These were, in short, the guys who wrote the daily horoscopes for the Baghdad Gazette. Matthew's readers would wonder, what's the significance of the Magi to the gospel message? It's not the first time in his account that they would have been surprised either. In the genealogy in chapter 1, Matthew also surprises his readers by including 4 women in Jesus' genealogy. Not only that, they were women of ill repute. Rahab and Tamar were prostitutes. Ruth was a Moabite, a foreigner. And Bathsheba is still mentioned as Uriah's wife, the scandal of all scandals. Matthew is setting the tone that the message of baby Jesus is not just for the ancient Israelites. The gospel message is not exclusive in nature, but is inclusive. There's universality to the message that Jesus brings. Matthew's trying to strike a universal tone. He wants not just men, but women included. Not just Israelites, but people from all nations. Not just those whose lives conform to the standard shape of orthodoxy, but even Magi, who are the least likely candidates of God's love that you can imagine. Matthew 2 doesn't, of course, vindicate astrology or deny the Bible's earlier warnings about diviners and quacks such as these magi. What Matthew may be trying to convey, however, is the reach of grace. Matthew's giving us a gospel sneak preview. The Christ child who attracted these odd magi to his cradle will later have the same magnetic effect on Samaritan adulterers, immoral prostitutes, greasy tax collectors on the take, despised Roman soldiers, and ostracized lepers. Matthew truly is an epiphany for any and all who tend to think that salvation is a members-only club, the appearance of which are easily recognizable to those who know. We can make the same mistake today about God's grace. How do people outside the church view church? Do they feel welcome? In Philip Yancey's book, What's So Amazing About Grace, in an interview with a prostitute and other down and outers in society, he asked them about church, and sadly their response is, church, why would I want to go there? It only made me feel worse. In our Tuesday night Bible study this past fall, we studied Pastor Andy Stanley's book, Irresistible, where we talked about why the church is so resistible to people today. We explored the relationship between the old covenant laws, which were more vertical in how we relate to God, as opposed to the new covenant of grace, which is more focused on our relationships with one another. Stanley suggests that the church has become too enamored with the old covenant rules rather than the new covenant law of love. He challenges the church to become more relationally focused and live by Christ's call to love one another. The church says Matthew should be a place of grace. The message of Christ is for all. It's not just about how good you are or your ethnicity. The church is a place where redeemed sinners come and meet their God. Celebrate His amazing grace. Matthew's gospel may shake us out of our comfort zones a bit. We tend to want to be with people who are like us. Matthew stretches us to minister to the down and outers, the outcasts, the losers. Ask yourself, who in your life fits that mold today? Matthew paints the gospel message and the response of the church as one of mission. He begins his gospel with an epiphany, a revelation, and in the end he ties it in with what our response as Jesus' followers should be to those who have the light of Christ in them. It's missional. Matthew ends his gospel with the Great Commission. Go into all nations, baptizing, teaching all that I commanded you. The revelation of Christ is for all people to hear. There's something about the message of grace that draws all sorts of people to Christ. It's irresistible. That means when grace truly gets a hold of you, you can't help but respond to God's love. It's a powerful force that draws you to the Father. The amazing thing about grace is that it's not just a one-time thing either. God's grace is with us throughout our lives. We may continue throughout our lives to have epiphanies or get 20/20 vision where God reveals himself to us on a deeper level. We live in a world that tends to resist grace. It's unfathomable that God would do that for humankind. In Matthew 2, Matthew foreshadows what the mission of Christ was for the world. The Magi are often commended for bringing gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh to Jesus. What's so significant about these gifts? They're not exactly the typical baby shower gifts. Some claim that the incense and myrrh point to Jesus' death because they were perfumes that were often used in the embalming process at that time. They claim that the message the Magi were bringing was that this child would die. Others claim that these were royal gifts and that by giving Jesus such extravagant gifts, they were recognizing him as king. So which is it? Do the gifts indicate that Jesus will die someday and need embalming, or that he's king? Well, maybe we don't need to choose. Because as the rest of the gospel will tell us, Jesus becomes the cosmic King of Kings and Lord of Lords precisely because he sacrificed himself. Because he was born to die. He's now the one to whom all creation owes allegiance and honor. To whom do you give your allegiance? Is the light of Christ shining through you as you're an ambassador of grace to this world of ungrace? Or are there dark areas in your soul that the light of Christ needs to break through, to free you from bondage of darkness that inhibits your walk with God? As we look ahead to a new decade, how can we create a world where Christ is included? Where all are included? How can we live out God's vision for the world? What changes in our own life need to happen to make that a reality? Or how about our community, our country, the world? What would a world look like if we practiced the perfect ideal of living by the law of love as laid out to us by this infant in a manger? It's a radical, life-changing way of living that could have profound effects on what the future holds. Perhaps as we make New Year's resolutions this week, we can reflect on how we can love as Jesus would have us love.